Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you once again for joining us on the United Regional Chambers Weekly Update. We try to bring on some interesting guests and interesting subjects from around the area. And as a lot of us know, April is Autism Acceptance Month. And it's my pleasure to bring on Adam Brodeur. He's the Senior Education Director for Amego, which is based here in Attleboro, but has a school and another facility up in Franklin. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I'm very happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Adam first.
Well, I'm a father of two. I'm married. I've been married for about 6 years. And I've been in the field for about 13 or 14 years. Um, Interestingly enough, I got my undergrad in Framingham, Mass, and I was on a more kind of traditional educational path. I was going to school to be an English teacher. Um, and when I got out of school, I ended up taking an entry level job here at Amego as an assistant teacher in this, really specialized school. Um, and I think it was in my mind kind of a stopover for a little bit. But I really liked the work that I was doing. I really liked the atmosphere. Um, and I really loved working with the kids that I was working with. So eventually, I went back to school and got my master's in special education, so I could be, a lead teacher here. I did that for a few years, um, and most recently, I've been an education director for several years here. Um, Coincidentally enough, a few years ago, when I have two kids, one's 4, one's 2, both on the spectrum. Both born many years after I got into the field. Um, so that's my story from then to now.
Well, Amigo is a fabulous organization. I've been affiliated with them for many years. John Randall and my favorite pal over there, Kate, who volunteers and shows up at a lot of our stuff. But first off, Adam, tell us, what is autism?
Autism, it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, and it's characterized by some common symptoms. The biggest one may be deficits in communication. It's not uncommon for kids and adults who are diagnosed with autism to have deficits in communication. Another common one is deficits in social skills. Um, Maybe some atypical sensory experiences, I guess I would say. Some individuals are really sensitive to loud noises or busy environments and things like that. So that's what I'm referring to when I say that. And then another one is kind of sort of compulsive or ritualistic behavior, or potentially being like rigid in terms of your daily routines, or having a difficult time when things don't go as planned. um, that being said, there are some other traits that might be common, for individuals with autism. Oftentimes, they have ability to get into deep focus about particular topics that are really big interest areas to them. Often individuals with autism can be very honest, um, which is awesome. Which is awesome. And then there can be a tendency to be very methodical. So while we may not like if things change, being very methodical, say if you have a job to do, or even just a task to complete, it could be a benefit, because you know how this should be done, and you don't cheat. um, all that being said, a common saying is that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. None of these, probably positive traits that I've described or challenges that I've described, they're not existing in every person diagnosed with autism across the board. It, when you work with somebody with autism, you treat that person. Knowing their diagnosis doesn't give you many head starts.
Right, and you treat them as an individual because that's what they are. They're people with individual talents and challenges. So,
Absolutely.
tell me a little bit about the mission of Amigo and your role in that.
Our mission statement is pretty simple. It's that, we're dedicated to supporting individuals with autism at home, in school, and in the community, and basically throughout their entire life. And we have some core values, or philosophies through which, that keep us on track. Um, and one of those is to remember that the individual and their natural support system, which is, most often their family, is the most important thing. When we're helping an individual be more successful in their life, it's important to consider who that person is, what their strengths are, where they need help, what their interests are, what their vision is for their life, and the same thing of their natural support system. So they're the most important people. The most important people are the people that we serve in their families. And as you know, working anywhere, work isn't always easy. So when we have to make difficult decisions, that's kind of our North Star. That's what we keep in mind. The most important thing is the family. The most important thing is the individual. If we're going to resolve this, let's make sure we're resolving it with that in mind. Um, and then, my role specifically, I oversee some of our classrooms here. So, I'd be supervising our teachers, and I kind of lead a very, a multidisciplinary team. Between the teacher and all the other adults who are assistant teachers in the classroom, occupational therapists, speech pathologists, physical therapists, and a BCBA, which is a board certified behavioral analyst. So that team is all working together, all from their different disciplines, to try to figure out what's best for this child. And it's kind of my job to make sure that we're pushing that, into focus, using the expertise from all the different team members, and making sure we have a good vision of how we're supporting this kiddo.
Well, seeing how April is Autism Acceptance Month, you know, uh, what does autism acceptance mean to you? And can you share with us a couple of examples, both personally and professionally? Because obviously you have both experience personally and professionally. So please share with us.
You really hit on some of it, that rings true for me, like right off the bat. Focusing on, like you would with any other person, focusing on their specific set of strengths and their specific areas where they're going to need more support. Um, and so but for me, it's kind of, there's a balance to it. It's focusing on what makes them unique, but also focusing on how I relate to them, and how I relate to all people. So while, somebody may be unique in the sense that they need, a certain amount of support to be successful, when I see them achieve that success, when I see, the teachers and the parents who are around them reveling in that success, when I can identify that this student is proud of what they've done, that they've made their parents proud, for instance, and that the student gets something from that. That's an example of how I try to balance. Everybody is unique, but also not losing sight of the fact that we're all people, and a lot of things that motivate me are going to motivate my students too. Sometimes it's just harder to tell. Um, a couple examples. Um, when I very first started working in the field, I was working with an adult, doing home services. So, in the afternoon, I'd go into this family's home, and I'd be supporting this adult with, their daily activities and chores and stuff like that. He also had a job, that I went with him to, so he could be successful there. And one of the things that was really important, to these parents, because they came from a strong religious background, and they're known to have gatherings and read prayers, with a big extended family. And this particular adult was very good at reading fluently. He struggled with comprehending what he was reading, but he really read beautifully. So we wanted to teach him to read some prayers so he could lead the prayer. And then, so some people might say that, potentially he doesn't understand what he's reading. You know what I mean? How meaningful is that? But let me tell you, when you teach somebody a skill that helps them participate fully in their home life and their extended community, when you saw the joy of the family members and his supporters who were watching him issue that, read those prayers perfectly, when you saw the joy that he got from understanding, hey, I really did something here, that was one of the probably still one of the most meaningful things that I remember being a part of, to see him, participate with his family, like everybody else in his family. Um, Self advocacy is a big one. A lot of our students, it can be difficult to understand their vision for their education, what they'd like to learn, what they want to do. um, so kind of the ultimate for us is when we have an IEP meeting and we're able to meaningfully include the individual in discussing what the vision is for the future, what skills do I need to learn, and then when somebody has the ability to say, I really want this and this, and the educational professionals are kind of negotiating, like, okay, I hear that. You know what I think will be really important? If you can learn to do work for a longer period of time, like 15 to 20 minutes, that might be help you be really successful. So let's keep in mind what you want to do, and let's get on that track. But also, let's compromise and work on what the teachers want to do too. So it's really cool when we can get the kids involved in things like that. Yeah.
Well, one question that pops up a lot is the age. You mentioned that you help a lot of adults, and I
Mhm.
know in some of the state programs and other programs that stops. I think at age 22, and some at age 18. Do you have any age restrictions?
Well, I work in our school in the children's division in Franklin. So my program, is up to 22. That at the school districts are responsible for the education up to the age of 22. So the kids stay in school with us until 22. um, but then once the student turns 22, it's kind of referred to as a kind of a drop off, or a cliff, because when they kind of transfer to the adult agencies, there's just less funding available to support the individual. So it can be challenging. But I think, let me go back and answer your question. Yes, I work in our children's division. However, we have several day habilitation centers
Yep.
in Massachusetts and in the region, and then we also, I think we have somewhere near 100 residential group homes across the region too, where we're supporting people there too.
Oh, again, I can't say enough about Amigo. They're such a great organization. But tell me, what are some of the common misconceptions about autism that wish people would understand better?
Um, I think that I think we've made a lot of progress with this misconception, or the idea that autism could be cured. And I think there's been a lot of progress with that misconception. Um, but I think what goes along with that, um, even if you understand that autism cannot be cured, kind of from that thought, even if you depart from that a little bit, um, kind of comes a motivation to normalize as much as possible, which and that goes back to autism acceptance. If our
Right.
goal is normalization for the sake of normalization, then we're not being accepting. um Being accepting, would be, okay, this individual has autism here, and we want them to be able to go to the trampoline park to have fun because they love trampolines. And so it's not saying it's identifying the barriers that are there. What are the problems that can happen? Oh, it's really crowded. They might not like to be around other kids. or different type of barriers that might impede the individual from accessing this activity that they really like. So being accepting would being like, okay, what are the barriers and what are the tools at our disposal, and how can we make them successful in this environment, not how can we make them like everybody else in this environment. um so I think that's a big one. Another one. I mean, maybe there might be an overrepresentation of, like, say, savantism, or say, while individuals with autism, they can really know a lot about a lot of things. Um and and we talked about that, like, hyper focus and methodical nature. But you know, I think it's somewhere around like 5% of individuals with autism end up, living independently. So there is, and there's, like, when you look at TV shows, look at Rain Man, I think Ben Affleck had a movie. If you look at the representation, oftentimes, we're representing, this, a savantism, somebody that's, maybe has some difficulty with social skills, but is a genius in something, in a way that makes up for everything. So
Okay. Well, as we get to the close of the show, have you got any final thoughts for us?
um final thoughts. I I'd say that, you know geez, what are my final thoughts?
Put you on the
um
spot there, buddy.
Hey, it happens. You can see my little accommodation here, like this environment. I'm not too comfortable with interviews, so I have paper clips to twirl around to kind of calm me down. But I think final thoughts when we're talking about autism acceptance, is the things that we've been talking about. There are things that every individual can shine. Every individual can shine, and we have to work with the people we're serving to try to find those areas, and to try to help them engage in activities that make them happy or fulfill them.
Well, again, Amigo does a tremendous job. You and your whole team do. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show. Thanks to my little friend Kate Bray. She always coordinates this for us. John Randall does a great job running the team. Adam Brodeur, thank you. Folks, shout out again to James Friedman and the team over there at AACS, who puts up with me each week. We truly appreciate everything that they do for the community. And please stay safe.